Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
No, that's fine. Let's get on to our main topic, in fact.
Yes, stories for Doctor Who virgins. As I mentioned at the start of the show, listener JT gave us the idea for this in our November episode when we were talking about alien worlds. And the premise was essentially, if someone's never watched Doctor Who, what story from the first Doctor, second Doctor, third Doctor, etc. would you show to them, and why? And Dave, we're going to tic-tac back and forth. We're going to give our opinions for each Doctor. You're going to do the odds. I'm going to do the evens. And I have said off mic, I reckon we'll snap 3 times.
Yeah, I'm looking at my list and I think that's probably the case. So let me say at the outset, when I was approaching this, there are some that I thought of the Doctor and just the right story just came into my mind. And I thought, that's it. That's what I would show somebody new to the series. There are others that I've really wrestled with, and I'll talk a bit more about those. Mm-hmm. But the starting premise I had is I'm not picking the best story.
No.
I'm picking the one that is a good one for people to get into the series, and also that is representative of that Doctor, and I'll particularly talk about that when we get to Tom. But as you said, I'm taking the lead on the odd Doctors, as in the odd number Doctors, although some of them are pretty odd. Good 1920s, festival hall joke there.
Yeah.
And the first one I really wrestled with was William Hartnell, because what do you give somebody to introduce them to the Hartnell years?
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe I give them the Aztecs, because that's a really good, nice 4-part historical. It's got the original TARDIS team. Then I thought, maybe the Rescue, because that's a really good Hartnell story. It's still got Ian and Barbara. And it's a nice condensed 2-parter. And then I thought, I really want to give them something with the Daleks. And I settled on picking the Daleks.
Really?
Yes, I just thought this is a really good adventure. It's got that original TARDIS team. It's got the Daleks, which is a big part of the Hartnell era. And I really hesitated a lot because I thought, it's 7-parters. Do you give a first timer 7-parters? And then I thought, you know what? If somebody doesn't like and doesn't understand slower 1960s paced television and they can't get through a 7-part story like the Daleks, then they're probably not going to enjoy the Hartnell era. So if they get through it and like it, then it's a great gateway into the Hartnell era. If they don't, maybe the Hartnell era is not for them.
This is like a baptism of fire you're sort of giving them, Dave.
Oh, it's a classic story, though. I think it's a really, really good story, and I'm not going to dismiss it because it had 7 parts.
Okay.
So I assume from your tone there, Rob, that we haven't snapped on Hartnell.
No, we have certainly not snapped on Hartnell, Dave.
Where did you go?
I've gone with the War Machines.
Oh, wow.
Now, I know this might be an odd choice, as there are better stories. Yes, we just mentioned that a moment ago. But I think here, the contemporary London setting is really good, and I think it would interest a new viewer. Yet it's surprisingly rare for Hartnell's era. You don't really have a lot of opportunities for this sort of setting. The concept of, this computer that's linking to computers all over the world, I think is a really cool concept that, if someone sees in a mid-60s black and white children's show, it's like, oh, wow, this is kind of like an internet sort of scenario, but it's the mid-60s they're talking about this. Wow, that's kind of interesting. And, of course, Ben and Polly are a great combo, and they come on board in the story. So, I think the setting, a bit of location shooting, the concept, new companions, I think this is a winner for a new viewer.
I must admit, when you first gave me the title, I was a bit sceptical because it is such an atypical Hartnell story. But now that I've heard your rationale, yeah, that makes sense.
Very good. Shall we move on?
We shall. You're leading us on the Troughtons.
Yes. For Patrick Troughton, I am going to recommend The Mind Robber.
Ooh, I pondered The Mind Robber, but I didn't pick it. Why did you go with that one?
Well, I know that being a Cyberman fan, you'd expect me to say Tomb or The Invasion or something like that, but I think Mind Robber is just the right length, and it's got a level of 60s weirdness that I think could be quite appealing to get someone into the Second Doctor's era. Arguably it's his best crew as well, because I think most people prefer Zoe to Victoria, and I think Jamie and Zoe work together really well.
Yep.
And like other stories in my list, you can find better stories in his era, but again, as a first time, I think this has all the right levels of weirdness and black and white charm. it's just really watchable.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. It is really watchable, and it, in fact, was the first Troughton story that I saw. It was repeated here in the mid-'80s, and I think for a lot of Australians it was their first Troughton, so it did work. I did go something different, though.
Okay.
And I did go with a Cyberman story.
Ooh.
I picked the Moonbase.
Very good.
And I did it because I thought, you know what, Troughton, it's got to be a monster story. If it's going to be a monster story, it should be a cyber story. I didn't want to go Tomb because I think Tomb would spoil them a bit, and once you've seen Tomb, nothing might seem quite as good. Plus, there's a bit of problematic stuff going on in Tomb that you might not want it to be their first experience, if you know what I mean. Like, you know, maybe you don't show them the episode with Cyberman, the first thing they see. Whereas the Moonbase, I just think, is that wonderful 1960s adventure on the moon. And again, I hesitated because it is semi-missing story. But I thought, again, you know what? If you watch the Moonbase on DVD now, it's got the 2 animated episodes, and you don't have a problem with that. You're ready to embrace the Troughton era.
Yeah, very good.
Which brings us to the Pearly Era, and Rob, when I was starting my preparation for this episode, this was the first story that I wrote down. I just thought, John Pertwee, it's got to be the Demons.
Snap!
See, there you go. Look, I think that for anybody listening to this, the reasons will be obvious. It is just that quintessential peak Pertwee era. The unit family's all there together and they all get to do something. Mike Yates gets to do stuff. Sergeant Benton gets to do stuff. You've got Joe. You've got the Master. You've got Azal. You've got polarity flows being reversed. You've got the Doctor on a motorcycle. You've got a helicopter chase. It's got an English village. Like, this is the Pertwee era, and it's not the best Pertwee story, but it's so fun and so watchable and so Pertwee.
Yeah, you've just mentioned a lot of things in my notes here, so I'll just skim through the other stuff. It's not a ridiculous length, you know, there are some long Pertwee stories. It's Earth-based, which is a Pertwee hallmark. It's like the Third Doctor's greatest hits. It's fabulous, and you know, the story itself is really good as well. We've mentioned all these, like, aspects of it, like, you know, it's peak unit, it's Pertwee's best loved companion, it's the Master, it's all of this. But the story is really good too.
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know, I think I might be biased as this was one of my first loves in the Pertwee era, but when I looked objectively on all the points, I think someone would have to be pretty brave to deny them, you know, because it's all there.
Yeah, I think if somebody watched The Demons and enjoyed it, they'll be very ready for the Pertwee era. And the Pertwee era was one example where I did err away from the six-parters, because some of those Pertwee six-parters are an effort. I love them, I could watch them, but again, wouldn't make someone do it for the first time.
Exactly.
Now, a tough one, because there's so many stories to pick from. Rob, where did you go on Tom?
Oh, it's so true. I was going to go to Pyramids of Mars for this, but I didn't. I've gone with something, and I'm sure this is left field. I am sure we will not snap on this. I've gone with The Deadly Assassin.
Wow. That is left field. Go on.
This throws you into a story with no companion baggage. You get an insight into the Doctor and his people and their technology with the Matrix. It's a rollicking little tale. It's got the really unsettling content like the drowning and the laughing clown and the steam train, which I think actually gels more with what a mature TV viewer of today would actually think, oh yeah, that's pretty normal. You know, it wouldn't seem like, oh, it's too childlike mid-70s kind of, you know, pap. It's like, oh, this actually has something to it. Like, yes, it's from the mid-70s, I can see that, but there's some spooky, weird stuff in here. This is interesting. And so, yeah, I have gone left field with this, very much so. But I would try a Doctor Who virgin out on The Deadly Assassin.
Yeah, look, that's an interesting pick, and again, your logic is impeccable, and you're absolutely right. I think somebody who grew up on films of the last 10 to 20 years would actually see a lot of the antecedents of those films in The Deadly Assassin. The Matrix trilogy, for example, is a classic example of that. With Tom, I originally was thinking about The City of Death, because this is a story that I actually have given to people, particularly who are Douglas Adams fans. And I've said, oh, look, if you like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, let me lend you this show called The City of Death. It's like wonderful Douglas Adams, and people have enjoyed it. But I thought, if you bring somebody into Tom on the City of Death, nothing else in his era is like that. You know, what happens when they then go to the Nightmare of Eden? And, you know, they're going to spend the rest of their life wishing they can get back to the quality of the City of Death.
Yeah.
So I picked something I thought we might have snapped here, Rob. It seems we came very close, because I did go with the Pyramids of Mars.
Really? Oh, so close, Dave.
So close. And I just thought, Tom Baker, it needs to be Tom and Liz Slade. It needs to be Tom and Sarah Jane. As much as I like some stories from the rest of his era, it's got to be that. It's got to be that Hinchcliffe era. It's got to be that gothic horror. It's got to be Tom at the peak of his powers, strong performance. And I just thought Pyramids of Mars has everything there. I think that's a really good introduction into Tom Baker. Terror of the Zygons, Robots of Death, Ark in Space were all on my shortlist, but Pyramids of Mars beat it out, and I'm very happy with that pick.
Yeah. Country house, location filming, it's very Doctor Who.
It really is. I think that's a good one.
Alrighty, we're back to odds, and it's the Fifth Doctor. You're going to go first.
I have been wrestling with this one basically up until we came time to record.
Really?
And in the end, I have picked The Visitation.
Okay.
I think that The Visitation is a very good example of Peter Davison. Again, it's not his best story. It's certainly not his worst story. It's just a good, solid adventure with Davison, with that larger TARDIS crew. It's got some really nice guest cast. It's got a really nice monster and an alien. It's got some nice location filming. It's got that sort of early JNT vibe of really making the production budget stretch and look like it's been well used. It's got the nice twist at the end of it, them being at Pudding Lane in 1666 for the Great Fire of London. And I think all of that would resonate quite well with a new viewer. And I think that if they enjoyed that, there are then some even better Davisons that they can start to get into, and some weaker Davisons that they might forgive. And I'll just say, actually, no, I'll let you give your pick, Rob, and then at the end I'll just say what my runner-up that I was really tossing up between it and The Visitation was.
Okay. Well, The Visitation was on my shortlist, so it might have been in the top 3 or 4, so we were a bit further away with the snap there. I almost went with The Awakening here, which might be a bit odd, but I've gone with Kinder.
Yes, I thought you might have. It wasn't the one that I had, but yeah, I thought you might have, Rob.
And I've gone with Kinder because it's smart. And it's also kind of sexy when Tegan is possessed by the Mara. And I think these are both aspects that aren't present in a lot of the Davo era. So as a bit of a treat to draw someone in, I think those things might appeal. Because, yeah, this doesn't have an old enemy in it. It's not a location shoot at all. It's actually quite odd in some ways. But I think that would draw the viewer in with this oddness and this sexiness and the fact that it is smart, and I think they would see the Fifth Doctor being very Fifth Doctor. I think it could be a winner, albeit, you know, a backdoor sort of winner. You know, it's not the most, not logical, but the most top of mind thing I think that most people would think of.
Yeah, I certainly see where you're coming from. It's a very clever and well realised script. It's interesting that we both went for that season 19 aesthetic. Whereas perhaps you would argue that the Dr. Tegan Turlough TARDIS team is stronger. And that's why the one that I was really tossing up with was Frontios, which I think, although it's not Davison's best story, is one of his top 2 or 3 best performances. It has got that Tegan Turlough TARDIS team. It is a good sort of interesting sci-fi adventure. So I was really tossing up between Visitation and Frontios, but like you, I went for a fun, classic season 19.
All right, that brings us back to evens and the Sixth Doctor.
Colin.
Yeah. Now, this was super hard because there's not much Colin.
No.
And I ruled out Trial completely because I thought it's just going to be too confusing for a newbie with all the cutaways to the Trial.
Yes.
You know, so although it's not my favourite story of season 22, I've gone with Attack of the Cybermen. No snap?
No snap. I thought we might have snapped on Colin, but no.
Okay. And that's because It's got a familiar villain. It's got some location shooting. There's some action. There's some gore. And again, people, modern TV viewers might think, oh, yeah, that's pretty good. That makes sense. It's a story that rattles along. And again, though this was a super hard choice, I still don't 100% feel it. Part of me thinks, maybe should have done Vengeance on Varos. But I'm going with Attack of the Cybermen.
Well, I did go with Vengeance on Varos. And my runner-up was Attack of the Cybermen. So
no!
Very, very near snaps. And look, unfortunately with Colin, it was very much process of elimination. Yeah. As you say, there's not many stories. I think you have to rule out Trial. You can't make somebody watch a segment of Trial, and neither can you say 14 episodes is an intro. The Twin Dilemma, because it's just embarrassingly bad. Time Lash, because I don't think it's fair to the Doctor's era. Revelation, I know a lot of people like it, but it's not typical in any way of the Colin era.
No.
I think Mark of the Run is dull. I think the Two Doctors are too long. You're left with Attack and Varos, both very good, exciting stories, and I went with Varos just because I think it's got a better representation of the Doctor and a better representation of Perry and of the relationship between the two. I think that's a bit off in Attack, and so for a new viewer, I thought I'd go a little bit safer with Varos, and I also thought that the topic and the material of Vengeance on Varos would resonate quite well with a 2021 audience. So, yeah, totally see where you're going with Attack. Could have gone there myself, but Varos got the nod for me.
All right, back to the odds.
McCoy was another one that I really had to think quite hard about, because what is a typical McCoy story? You look at each of his 3 seasons and there is a real different vibe to each of them. So how do you come up with something that is representative and fair? And I have picked Battlefield.
Okay.
And I've done that because I think that it has the darker and more complicated and more plotting aspects of the Seventh Doctor's persona from season 26, but it's still got a bit of that fun and comic lightness of touch from the earlier parts of the McCoy era, so I think it's quite representative. I think it looks really good. The location filming is really good. It's got a really strong guest cast. The Destroyer is something that comes in at the end, and it's the best of late 80s animatronics, and it looks good. Yeah. Gene Marsh, I think that the King Arthur stuff, again, is fairly timeless. Whether you're a viewer in 1989 or a viewer in 2021, you get what the antecedents and the references are in this story. So I think it's accessible. I think it's good. I think it's fair. Again, not his best, but a fun middle representation.
Very good. And look, I agree with all of that. I've gone with something super obvious, though. I've gone with Remembrance of the Daleks.
that is the obvious one, yes. And fair enough.
It's a big, fun storyline. It's Daleks. There's some mystery. Aces being awesome. The effects still look pretty decent today.
Yeah.
And this is true. I don't know anyone, and I mean it, anyone who has ever watched this and gone, yeah, nah, not for me. And it's almost unique in that regard when I think about it, So you can point to more cerebral stories like Ghostlight or bigger adventures like Fenric, and they could be quite interesting too.
Yeah.
But I think this is just like an ice cream sundae. It just goes down so well. Everyone loves it. It's just the no-brainer one for me.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from there. And I think in common of our 2 picks is, again, aiming for that sort of middle era McCoy. It's not the season 24. No. It's not really the later season 26. It's just good, solid, fun McCoy. And yeah, I'm very relaxed about that choice and could easily have gone it myself.
Yeah.
Now, the next even Doctor is Paul Mcgann. Now, I guess I picked the telly movie, but Rob, you've got a bit more to say as a Mcgann fan.
Yeah, look, maybe some obvious points here, but they need to be said, because outside of the TV movie, you've got the EDAs, the Eighth Doctor Adventure novels, you've got Big Finish. For the EDAs, I'd recommend someone just starts reading them from the start, because they have this lovely retro beginning from Uncle Terence. He writes the 8 Doctors, and then it's off and racing, and by the second novel, you've got Kate Orman and her husband, Jonathan Bloom, writing not Alien Bodies, Vampire Science. Gosh, Alien Bodies comes a bit later, I think probably about 6th in the range by Lawrence Miles, and that's something that blew my mind as well.
Yeah.
This range kicks some real goals pretty quickly. There's some dross here and there. But I would recommend just, if you can get a hold of them, because I know they're getting more and more expensive these days, just read them in as best an order that you can. They're really good. It's a range that doesn't muck around. Big Finish, meanwhile, I'd say there are two logical start points. Either the very first of the 8th Doctor monthly adventures, Storm Warning, which is where he meets his companion Charlie, and they have a bunch of adventures together, or a later monthly adventure, Blood of the Daleks, where he meets another companion, Lucy, and they have a bunch of adventures. They're probably the two starting points. There are later box sets that are great, but they're more expensive, so you can probably get the earlier monthly adventures cheaper. Start with the Charlie stuff or the Lucy stuff and enjoy.
Yeah, look, I can't disagree with anything there. I think what you said about the EDAs, from my limited knowledge, is true, and I have no knowledge of Mcgann Big Finish, so I'll take your word for it and just give a plug as the resident Virgin New Adventures fan for The Dying Days, which is also a really good intro to Paul Mcgann.
Fabulous. Back to odds again.
Back to odds. We're into the new series, and Christopher Eccleston. After I wrote down The Demons for John Pertwee, the next one that I wrote down was Dalek for Christopher Eccleston.
Okay.
And this is for the very straightforward personal reason that this is the story that really introduced me to Christopher Eccleston. Up until then, I was like, yeah, this is a really good show. It's well made. I like it. But I'm not sure I'm quite into it. Dalek was the one where I thought, yes, I'm into this show. I'm into this era. And I'm into this Doctor. And I just think it is a wonderful piece of television that I've never heard anybody say was bad. People have faults with bits of it, that's fine, but I don't know anyone who doesn't think this is a good, solid story.
Yeah, that is a real good one, but not a snap.
Not a snap, okay.
No. I've gone with The Unquiet Dead. There's silence. My reasoning, it's past the debut story for Eccleston, so things are, getting into full swing, but it's still early doors. So we're still seeing how amazed Rose is with time travel, which is important, I think, for a viewer watching. It's a bit scary with the Gelf, and of course we have Dickens in this. He's marvellous. We have that bittersweet ending that, he'll be dead soon. So we've just watched this wonderful adventure with the guy, and then we get that gut punch that, he'll actually be dead soon. It's just a marvellous little story, and it's on the good side of the Mark Gatiss ledger. I think you could show someone this and they'd instantly get it. Some people have gone back in time. They're these ghost-like things. Oh, and there's Charles Dickens. It's perfect in that sense.
I'm going to say, Rob, this is probably the one so far I've most disagreed with you, or least agreed with you is probably a better way to say. I really take what you're saying about that excitement and enthusiasm of the new adventures in time, which is fair. I think that whole celebrity historical thing is a good vibe to introduce them on, but I actually think you're not being fair to the Eccleston era. I think that this is not representative of him at his best. I think it's still very early. I think it's still a little bit uncertain, a bit flat, and I don't know, I'd be a little bit worried that maybe someone would see this and decide the Eccleston era isn't as good as it is. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on the story. I don't know. This is one for the listeners to weigh in, please. What do you think of The Unquiet Dead? Is this a good intro?
Yeah. Vote Rob or vote Dave.
Yeah, no, please do. I'm very, very happy to be wrong on this. No, that one does surprise me, I've got to say.
Okay. All right. Shall we move on to the evens?
Yes. Now, let's see if we can surprise each other with the Tennant era.
Yes. Similar to The Unquiet Dead, there's a historical angle to this story. It's The Girl in the Fireplace.
I can't stand The Girl in the Fireplace.
Which I think is worth hitting a virgin over the head a few times with this. Like, yes, look, it's historical. Yes, it's a spacey sci-fi series, but there's time travel, and this guy can go back, hundreds of years to France or 2,000 years back to, the Roman Empire or whatever. I think the historical sort of angles are so important. But this also does some lovely sci-fi stuff with those clockwork dudes. So it's a non-arc, single episode. To me, it's not the best story, but it's a complete package in one 45, 50-minute story. So, boom, there we go. Look,
it's not my pick. And
evidently.
No, and look, I'm self-aware and honest enough to know that I'm in a very small minority on this story. I know a lot of people love it, so that probably is a very good reason to pick it. I do agree that the historical setting is smart. I think that the execution of the Clockwork Robots is smart. So, yeah, look, it's totally a fair pick. It's just not one for me, which is, that's fine. Interesting that we're diverging a lot more on these newer Doctors. Wonder if that'll hold up.
Yeah, I mean, we've only had one snap so far, but we went close a few times.
We went close a few times in the classics, but we're way apart so far on the new series. And that's, I think, going to be exacerbated when I tell you my David Tennant pick was Planet of the Ood.
No, really?
Really? I went there because, again, I thought it's David Tennant at the height of his powers, but not giving one of his more outrageous and over-the-top performances. So I think it's a fair representation of him as the Doctor. I think Donna's, by this stage, settled into the role, and there's a good dynamic between them there. And I know Donna appeals to a lot of particularly casual viewers, so I think that's a good combination to introduce them to. It's got a nice little bit of morality and that RTD sort of moral vibe. It's got some nice location setting. I think in the cast you've got Tim McInerney, who a lot of people will recognise and go, oh, I got him in the show. That's a good thing, and that's a positive. It's got that emotional ending. It's got Murray Gold being Murray Gold. I think this is just a nice, simple reflection of the Tennant era. I was very tempted to go with the Impossible Planet two-parter, but I just thought that's not a fair representation and would give people perhaps the wrong impression of what his era is like overall.
Yeah.
Whereas I thought Planet of the Ood was sort of that nice, typical, middle-of-the-road Tennant that would be a sensible and safe intro for people.
Interesting. I've got to say, that's a story I may have only watched once in my life.
I've watched it a couple of times. It is one of the Tennants I have gone back to. So I get a bit out of it, and I think that, yeah, it's just representative of him. But again, the Tennant era's got 3 quite different seasons with 3 very different companions. So I did find it quite hard to kind of draw that line, what is a typical Tennant story.
Yeah, very true. I was starting to look down at the specials, and I thought, oh gosh, no, I've got to go a bit earlier in his era, I think, because by then he is a very particular kind of Doctor. Yeah.
Speaking of having very different eras within the era, we're now onto Matt Smith, and again, how do you define a typical representative Matt Smith story? Because Series 5 is so different to Series 6, then you got a whole different vibe for Series 7. And I went back on a number of options. I was really thrashing this out, which companion do you want to represent his era? And in the end, I actually went for a two-parter.
Ooh.
And I went for an early two-parter, and that is Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone.
Wow, okay. That's got a lot of baggage, like bringing back the Weeping Angels and sort of some assumed knowledge almost.
Yeah, I think that it's still fairly accessible, but if your problem is going to be baggage and continuity and arc, what do you pick from the Matt Smith era? Because the Matt Smith era is in some ways defined by that stuff. This is where the Moffat arc is absolutely at its peak, and there's very few standalone stories. But what this gives you, I think, is Matt Smith giving a pretty good performance. In there you get the Angels, which is important. You get River Song, which is important. You get Matt Smith giving a big wanky speech, which I think is also typical of his era. And, if you don't like the Time of Angels, I don't think you'll like the Matt Smith era. Like there's a lot of more Moffat-y stuff to come. If you do think this is a kind of fun story, it's got that really nice fun cold open where River puts the engravings on the device that's going to be found by the Doctor in the museum, so he knows to pick her up and all that sort of stuff. And it's got Moffat's themes about the military becoming a clerical order and all that sort of, like, all the Moffat boxes I feel are here. This is a thing that if you enjoy it, you're going to enjoy a lot of the Matt Smith era. If you think this is just stupid, then the Matt Smith era is probably not for you. If you can't deal with this one, well, my God, you're not going to deal with a lot of other stuff that's coming.
All right. Obviously, we haven't snapped.
No, you're going to prove to me that there's a nice standalone easy one that I've overlooked, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I really am, Dave. This was going to be the Doctor's Wife, but in the end I went with the 11th Hour, because the 11th Hour is essentially a reboot, and it's just begging for new viewers to pick it up and see, how this madman begins his journey. The story itself is pants. It's terrible, but it's more about the big scenes and the set pieces of dialogue than it is trying to tell a really interesting story. And that's fine, I think. As far as introduction stories for a new Doctor go, I think this is probably one of the best in both classic and New Who. So to me, it's hard to go past because it's designed for new viewers, Dave.
Yep, very obvious and very sensible choice, and can't fault you for it at all. I did have the Power of Three bouncing around a bit as a bit of a standalone, but in the end I didn't think it was quite strong enough to be fair to the era.
No. That's another one I think I've watched once. Very strange ending.
Strange ending.
Just waves the sonic screwdriver and fixed everything. God, great.
Yeah, but look, the 11th Hour is a very popular and well-regarded intro that's, sets the tone. Matt Smith is Matt Smith from the start. So, interesting again. We've both gone, though, for very early stories. I think Time of Angels is like his 3rd or 4th episode.
Well, indeed, a bit of trivia. I think it's the first time he's in front of the camera.
Yeah, so it is interesting. We've sort of both gone with quite safe intros to the Matt Smith era, which is not to knock the Matt Smith era, and if we're sounding like we are, we apologise. It's just that it's an era that it's very hard to dive into midway.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like Smithy as a Doctor. His era, though, it's checkered. Anyway, on to Evans, and it's back to me.
It is.
12th Doctor. Here I am again with another Gator story. And it's not even one I particularly liked at the time, though it's grown on me a little since it came out. It's Robot of Sherwood.
Snap!
Yay! At last! At last!
we can still have 3.
Yes, we can. Look, I think this is funny. It's got Capaldi being a prick, but he's a funny prick.
Yes.
It's a bit of an adventure. Again, it's not part of some big arc that a newbie has to understand. It's fine. It's a good thing. I'd be quite happy to put this in front of someone.
I absolutely agree with you. It's a good standalone story. I think it's got a very representative but accessible Doctor in it. As you say, Capaldi's got his rougher edges, but it's quite funny to watch. It's quite enjoyable. It's a very accessible story because of the subject material. Everybody knows about Robin Hood and his merry men, and everybody's going to be looking for that twist. I guess you're androids or something. It works well. It's just a well-made, fun story. Time Heist was my runner-up for very similar reasons. But snap on that one, and that wasn't a hard pick for me, I've got to say.
Fabulous.
Which brings us to Jody Whitaker, which was tough because it's the era that's on now. So I don't think we perhaps quite have the distance from it to really go what's typical of her era. So I just went with a story that I think is very good. It's very well written, and it's got a very good Jodie performance. And that is, one of my favourites, if not my favourite of the era, which is Demons of the Punjab.
Snap!
We got to 3! Look, there are bigger and more exciting stories like Spyfall, Fugitive of the Jadoon, etc. that I thought could have been in contention, but again, I think that was sort of picking something that's going to let people down as they see more of the era. I just thought this is just a solid adventure, and if you don't love Jodie's Doctor, and if you don't love Graham, and even the other companions get stuff to do in here, I think it's a really good way to just fall in love with the TARDIS team in this era. So that's why I went with it.
Yeah. Now, I agree with all of that, of course, because I've picked it as well. I really like The Haunting of Villa Diodati. But, imagine trying to explain all the bits in that to a newbie, like, there's half a Cyberman, there's a message from some guy called Jack Harkness who you've never seen before, and it ties into what comes next. It'd just be bonkers to put in front of someone. So, although I love it, I couldn't pick it. So, Demons it is. Again, it's showing people the time travel theme. They're back in time. It's an interesting era. There's that dash of sci-fi, though, although it's not too overwhelming. I think it's near the top for Jodie Doctor Who, and if someone wants a taste of, peak Jodie thus far, I think this is it.
Yeah, I agree. And also that, not celebrity historical, but that event historical is actually something that is quite representative of her era. They do it a number of times. So
yeah, they have.
I think that this is clearly the one that we've agreed on. This and Robot of Sherwood are probably the two that we've really agreed on in the new series. So we only really split from each other in the in the RTD era.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. But we got 3, and that was not a setup, people. We have no idea what the other has picked when we do these things.
No, I genuinely thought we might snap on Varos. I genuinely thought we might snap on Pyramids of Mars.
Yeah, well, we almost did.
And we almost did, and ditto the Visitation. I didn't think you'd go there. I actually picked you'd go with Kinder. Interesting, though, that yes, we have come at this from very similar points of view, and it's not a list of the best stories, and it's not a list of intro stories. It's just what you'd put down on someone and say, if you like this, then there's more of this to come, and better of this to come. But if you don't like this, if you don't like the Daleks, you're not going to enjoy the Hartnell era. If you don't like Time of Angels, you're not going to enjoy the Matt Smith era. It's just, that's what I've got to say, really.
Yeah, I'd like to do a social experiment, and if people are out there with non-Doctor Who friends, could you take our lists and pick what ones you like from our combined list, and actually put these in front of people and tell us what happens? I'm kind of like mad scientist cackling here, wondering what would actually happen.
Absolutely, and certainly do send us and tweet us your own lists, and see how many snaps we have with members of the audience.